A battle for survival unfolded in the heart of Wyoming beneath the clear blue sky. It defied all expectations and forged a path of courage and resilience. Blaze, a wild Mustang who once ran free across the plains, was now staggering through a forest, his legs buckled from pain, his once fiery chestnut coat stained with blood. He had been left behind, abandoned after a vicious fight with another stallion. Worse than the physical pain was the deeper, more terrifying threat. A pack of wolves closing in, their eyes glowing in the shadows, their hunger palpable. Blaze had no idea how much longer he could run. The pack was getting closer, smelling his weakness, sensing the perfect opportunity to strike. The odds were against Blaze, and the world seemed to have turned its back on him, just when it seemed like all hope was lost. Something incredible happened, a turn of events that would shatter everything you thought you knew about survival, courage, and the will to fight back. Blaze stumbled through the dense forest, his body trembling with exhaustion and pain. His legs wobbled under the strain, each step more difficult than the last. The battle with the stallion had left deep gashes along his flank and a jagged tear in his side. Blood matted his chestnut coat, and his breath came in labored gasps. There was no time to rest. The wolves were close. He could feel their presence, their sharp eyes watching him from the shadows of the trees. The sun was high in the sky, its golden rays filtering through the canopy of pine trees. Blaze, once a proud and untamed Mustang, had always relied on his strength and speed. Today, those gifts feel like distant memories. He had fought for his life, but now he was just a wounded animal on the run. With each painful step, Blaze wondered if this was the end. He could hear the distant growls of the pack as they closed in, growing bolder with each passing minute. His ears flicked nervously, straining to catch any sound. But all he heard was the rustling of leaves and the faint calls of birds. No footsteps, no warning. Then the smell hit him, a mix of wet fur and the unmistakable scent of a predator. Blaze's heart pounded in his chest as the realization dawned. They were behind him. He pushed himself forward, desperate to reach the open field he knew was nearby. The trees were thinning, and he could almost taste the air of freedom, the smell of open grass and endless sky. But with every step, the pack was closing in, and the gap between them seemed to shrink. Blaze's muscles screamed in protest, his vision blurred by the pain. His mind raced, trying to calculate the best course of action. There were only so many places to run. His strength was waning, and he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going. The world around him began to fade, his focus narrowing to the sound of the wolves' pursuit. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a rustling sound followed by the growl of the lead wolf. Blaze's eyes widened in terror as the first of the pack lunged at him. His instincts took over. He turned and bolted, his legs pumping with whatever strength he had left. His hooves pounded against the earth as he galloped, the pack hot on his tail. But the pain in his side flared with every movement, and his legs felt like they were made of stone. Blaze could feel the sharp teeth of the wolves nipping at his heels. The adrenaline surged. But it wasn't enough. His breath came in ragged bursts. As the forest blurred around him, he knew he couldn't outrun them for much longer. It was in that moment of desperate, hopeless flight that something incredible happened. A movement in the trees, a figure emerging from the shadows, a human. Blaze's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could someone be here to save him? Blaze's hooves thundered against the earth, his body growing weaker with each painful stride. His heart raced, blood dripping from his injuries. The scent of fear thickened the air. The wolves were relentless, their growls and snarls filling the forest like a haunting melody. Blaze's mind was spinning. He had never felt so helpless. His body, once strong and untamed, was no longer enough to fight back. As the lead wolf lunged again, Blaze instinctively veered left, his legs buckling under the effort. He tried to keep his balance, but his vision was clouded by exhaustion. He knew he couldn't keep running forever. His muscles burned, and his side throbbed with each step. Just as he thought he might fall, a sharp voice cut through the chaos. Get away from him. The sound was like a bolt of lightning amid his nightmare. Blaze's head jerked toward the voice, and he saw her, a woman, tall and commanding, stepping into the clearing from between the trees. She had dark brown hair pulled back into a tight braid. Her clothes were worn but practical, and a rifle was slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were focused and determined, and there was no hesitation in the way she moved. Blaze's heart raced, not with fear, but with a flicker of hope. The wolves hesitated for a moment, unsure of the sudden shift in the air. "Move back," the woman commanded, her voice steady and powerful. Blaze saw her glance at the pack, her eyes narrowing as she took in the situation. She was calculating and fearless. The lead wolf growled, its yellow eyes gleaming with hunger, but the woman didn't flinch. She raised her rifle, aiming it with precision at the pack. "Leave now," she demanded. "You've already caused enough harm." The wolves, sensing the change, began to back away slowly, their eyes flickering between Blaze and the woman. There was a moment of stillness, as if the entire forest held its breath. Blaze's body sagged with relief. He couldn't believe it. He was no longer alone in his fight for survival. The woman lowered her rifle, but kept her stance steady. She took a few slow steps toward Blaze, her eyes scanning his wounded form. "You're not safe yet," she murmured, more to herself than to Blaze. She moved with careful, measured steps, never taking her eyes off the Mustang. Blaze was too exhausted to move. He stood there trembling, unsure if he could trust this stranger. But something about her presence calmed him. She wasn't afraid. She was in control. "Easy, boy," she whispered, coming closer. Her hand reached out toward Blaze's trembling form, and though he was wary, the exhaustion in his limbs overtook any hesitation he had left. He allowed her to come closer, her fingers brushing gently along his side, assessing the damage. Her touch was soft, but firm, her eyes filled with determination and compassion. "You've been through a lot, haven't you?" she murmured, her voice a soothing balm amidst the chaos. Blaze let out a shaky breath, his body trembling from both fear and the strange sense of safety this woman brought. She moved, with purpose, her touch calm and steady, as though she had done this 100 times before. In the distance, the wolves began to retreat, their growls fading as they left the clearing. But Blaze didn't move. He stayed still, feeling the gentle pressure of the woman's hand against his side. Her presence was like a lifeline. "Come on, let's get you out of here," she said softly, her voice filled with resolve. Blaze took a cautious step forward, his muscles protesting, but the woman was there, guiding him. Her touch was grounding, steadying him as they moved toward the safety of the trees. Blaze couldn't quite believe it. After all the pain, all the fear, there was someone who cared, someone who saw him not just as a Mustang, but as a soul in need of help. For the first time in what felt like forever, Blaze allowed himself to trust again. Blaze's legs wobbled as they made their way through the dense forest. The woman, whom he now realized was no stranger to hardship, moved with grace, guiding him gently but with purpose. Each step she took seemed to ground him, and for the first time in days, he felt a sense of calm settling over him. The forest was quiet now, the chaos of the wolves fading into a distant memory. Only the rustling of the leaves and the soft sounds of nature filled the air. Blaze could feel the weight of his injuries, the cuts, the bruises, and the deep ache in his ribs, but there was a flicker of something else too, something he hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime: hope. He wasn't alone anymore. The woman led him to a small clearing where a narrow trail cut through the trees, winding its way toward a small cabin that Blaze had failed to notice earlier. The cabin was modest, built from timber and stone, with smoke rising lazily from the chimney. It looked like a place of safety, a sanctuary amid the wild. The woman stopped at the edge of the clearing, turning to face Blaze, her brow furrowed as she inspected him, taking in the extent of his injuries. He could see the empathy in her eyes, but there was also determination, an unwavering resolve that made him trust her even more. "All right, big guy," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "We're almost there." Blaze took a deep breath, feeling the strain in his chest as he stood still. He wanted to push forward, but his body refused to cooperate. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep going. "Hey, it's okay. You've made it this far," the woman continued, her hand resting gently on his neck. "You're strong, and you're not alone anymore. I won't let anything happen to you." Her words were a balm to his broken spirit, soothing the panic that had gripped him for days. Slowly, he moved forward, each step taken with caution, but also a renewed sense of determination. The woman walked beside him, her hands still resting on his side, guiding him toward the cabin. As they reached the cabin, Blaze could hear the sound of a door creaking open. A man stepped out, tall and weathered, with a deep voice that spoke of years spent working the land. "Lena, you made it back," the man said, his gaze falling on Blaze. There was no surprise, no judgment in his eyes, just a quiet understanding. He stepped aside, allowing Lena and Blaze to enter. Inside the cabin, it was warm, the flickering light of a fire casting a soft glow across the room. A simple wooden table stood in the center, along with a few chairs and shelves filled with tools and supplies. Blaze noticed the care in the space and the thoughtful organization of things. It was a place meant for healing. Lena helped him inside, leading him to a makeshift stall where he could rest. She moved with efficiency, but there was a tenderness in her touch as she gently guided Blaze into the space, making sure he was comfortable. The man, Lena's partner, it seemed, watched them quietly. He didn't say much, but there was a look of deep respect in his eyes. He knew what it meant to save an animal like Blaze. "You're safe now," Lena murmured, kneeling beside him as she began to tend to his wounds. She was careful and precise in her movements, and Blaze, for the first time in days, felt himself begin to relax. He could feel the warmth of the fire, the scent of herbs in the air, and Lena's steady presence beside him. The cabin, with its quiet beauty and comfort, was a world away from the forest where he had been abandoned. Blaze lowered his head, exhaustion sweeping over him. His body ached, but there was a sense of peace here, a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in so long. Lena continued her work, her hands gentle as she cleaned his wounds. Blaze's heart began to settle, the frantic beat slowing as he realized he was no longer just surviving. He was healing. "You've been through so much," Lena said quietly, almost as though she were speaking to herself, "but you're stronger than you know." Blaze nickered softly, his eyes meeting hers, and for the first time in a long time, he felt a bond that transcended words. It was a quiet promise between them. He would heal, and in return, Lena would help him find his way back to himself. "Thank you," he seemed to say in his way as he closed his eyes, allowing himself to drift into a peaceful slumber. The days that followed were filled with a slow, steady rhythm. Lena worked tirelessly to care for Blaze, tending to his wounds with a mix of skill and compassion that spoke of her profound knowledge of animals. The man, whose name was Ethan, helped when he could, offering Blaze food and water. But it was clear that the bond between Lena and the Mustang was growing stronger by the day. Blaze's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. His coat, once dull and matted, began to shine under the care of his new guardians. His movements were still tentative, but he was walking again, each step taken with more confidence than the last. The pain that had once held him in its grip was slowly fading, replaced by the strength that had always been within him, just waiting to be awakened. But there were moments of doubt, moments when Blaze would stop and stare out the cabin's window, his gaze lost in the forest beyond. Lena noticed and knew that Blaze was not yet free of the trauma he had experienced. It would take time for him to fully trust again, to believe that he was truly safe. One afternoon, Lena led Blaze out into the open field behind the cabin, a lush expanse of green that stretched out toward the distant mountains. The sun was high, casting a warm golden light over everything, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. Blaze stood still, his eyes scanning the landscape, his muscles rippling beneath his coat as he shifted. Lena could sense the energy that still pulsed through him, the wildness, the independence. She knew that he wasn't completely tamed, not yet, and maybe he never would be. But that was part of who he was, and Lena wasn't interested in breaking that spirit. She wanted him to be free in every sense of the word. She stood beside him, gently stroking his mane. "You're stronger than you think," she said softly. Her words meant as much for herself as for Blaze. "I know you've been through hell, but you're here now, and we're going to keep moving forward." Blaze snorted a soft sound that seemed to echo with the agreement. He was ready. He just needed a little more time. As Lena came back, she decided it was time to push him just a little further. She grabbed a rope from the small wooden shed nearby and began to secure it around Blaze's neck, not as a means of control, but as a way to guide him. The bond between them was still new, fragile in places, but it was growing stronger each day. Blaze tensed as she fastened the rope, but Lena remained calm, her touch gentle yet firm. She led him a few steps forward, testing his strength and his willingness to move with her. Blaze hesitated for a moment, but then, as if realizing that Lena wasn't forcing him, he began to walk beside her, his stride long and powerful. For the first time since he had arrived at the cabin, Blaze began to move freely, unencumbered by the weight of fear. The open field before him was no longer a reminder of his abandonment, but a place of opportunity, a place where he could heal both physically and emotionally. Lena smiled to herself as she watched Blaze move with more grace than he had ever shown. It was a small step, but it was an important one. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that Blaze's recovery wasn't just about physical healing. It was about him reclaiming his life, his freedom. But just as she was beginning to feel a sense of relief, a familiar sound cut through the air, the low growls of a chorus of wolves. Just on the edge of the forest, Blaze's ears pricked up, his body going rigid. The terror that had once gripped him when he was chased in the forest returned in an instant. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the tension in the air, the sudden shift in Blaze's demeanor. She knew the wolves were near, closer than she wanted to admit. Blaze's instincts were kicking in, and she could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Blaze, no," she murmured, her voice steady but firm. "We're safe here. They won't hurt you." But Blaze was no longer listening. His legs were quivering, ready to bolt at any moment. His wild instincts were at war with the trust he had begun to build with Lena. He wanted to run, to escape, but the bond between them was holding him back just enough for him to pause. The wolves' growls grew louder, more persistent. It was as if they could sense Blaze's vulnerability and were closing in on him once again. Lena took a deep breath, trying to keep her fear at bay. She knew this moment would come. Blaze would face his demons, just as she had to face hers. But the stakes were higher now. Blaze's trust in her was fragile, and if she couldn't reassure him, she feared that everything they had worked for would unravel. "Blaze, listen to me," Lena said, stepping in front of him. She stood tall, refusing to show fear, her voice commanding. "We are not going anywhere. You're not alone. Do you hear me?" Blaze's eyes met hers, his body trembling. He was caught between his primal instincts and the safety Lena was offering him. He hesitated, the growls of the wolves growing louder with each passing second. And then, just as Lena felt her heart tighten with dread, Blaze moved forward, his legs shaking but determined. He didn't flee. He stood his ground. Lena felt a rush of pride as Blaze held his position. The wolves may have circled, but Blaze wasn't going to run anymore. He had found his strength, and with it, he was ready to face whatever came next. Lena's heart raced as the wolves circled, their growls echoing through the trees. Blaze stood strong beside her, though his body was still trembling with the memory of his past's abandonment, the wild forest, and the day spent fighting for survival. But now something has shifted. He wasn't just a wounded Mustang anymore. He was a survivor, and so was she. The wolves continued their approach, their eyes glinting in the dimming sunlight, their bodies low to the ground, ready to strike. Lena could feel the tension in the air, the thrum of instinct, and the unspoken battle between fear and strength. She had to act quickly, or everything they had worked for would be lost. "Stay close, Blaze," she whispered, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She knew that the connection they shared, however new, was their greatest strength. If they could stay together, if Blaze could trust her now, then they could face anything. The wolves paused, their eyes flickering between Lena and Blaze, sensing the power in their unity. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Lena could feel the wild energy of the wolves, the pull of the forest, and the weight of Blaze's past fear threatening to take over. But Blaze, surprisingly, didn't back down. His eyes were locked on the wolves, his body still trembling but resolute. He was a Mustang, wild by nature, and he would not be dominated by fear any longer. Lena took a slow step forward, positioning herself between Blaze and the wolves. She didn't have weapons, no means of fighting back apart from her will, and the bond she had worked so hard to forge with Blaze. "We don't want trouble," she called out to the wolves, her voice louder now, trying to assert dominance without aggression. "Go back to the forest. This is not your fight." The wolves, sensing the tension and the strength between Lena and Blaze, hesitated. They weren't stupid. They had been circling the Mustang, testing him, seeing if he was weak, ready to crumble under the pressure. But they hadn't counted on one thing, the resolve that Lena had instilled in Blaze. For a moment, the wolves stared at them, their growls softening before they turned and melted back into the shadows of the trees. Lena let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. The immediate threat was over, but she knew that Blaze wasn't out of the woods yet emotionally. He was still fragile, still carrying the scars of a life that had betrayed him. Blaze, still standing tall, gave a soft snort, his body relaxing slightly. His eyes were wild, but the flicker of trust that Lena had worked so hard to earn was there, and it was growing stronger. Lena turned to him, her heart swelling with pride. "You did it," she whispered, stepping closer and gently running her fingers through his mane. "You stood your ground. You're not that horse anymore. You're not the one who was chained in the forest. You're free now." Blaze nickered softly, his body still trembling, but it was no longer from fear. It was the aftershock of adrenaline, the recognition that he had fought not just the wolves, but the ghosts of his past. She stayed there for a long time, simply holding space for him, letting him process. He wasn't ready to let her lead him just yet, but they had crossed an important threshold. The Mustang was no longer just a wounded animal. He was a companion, a friend, and perhaps even a protector. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the world in golden hues, Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude settle over her. The fight with the wolves had been more than just a physical confrontation. It had been a test of their bond, of the trust they had built together, and they had passed. Blaze was no longer a prisoner of his past. He was a horse on the path to healing, just like Lena. They were both recovering from wounds, both learning what it meant to trust again, and both finding strength in each other. As the day turned to night and the stars began to twinkle above them, Lena whispered, "We'll keep moving forward, Blaze, together." And in that moment, she knew that nothing, not even the wild wolves or the memories of his past, could tear them apart. They had forged a bond that was stronger than anything they had faced before. They were ready for whatever came next. The wind had picked up by the time Lena and Blaze made their way deeper into the forest. The sun had long since set, and the world was bathed in the silver glow of the moon. Lena's senses were heightened, her eyes scanning the woods for any signs of danger. But for once, she wasn't worried about what might be lurking in the darkness. With Blaze by her side, she felt invincible, but the forest had its way of testing those who dared enter. The deeper they went, the denser the trees grew until the shadows seemed to swallow them whole. The air was thick, heavy with moisture, and the scent of pine. An unsettling quiet hung over the land. Lena could feel it in her bones. Something was coming. Blaze, too, seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere. His ears were pricked, his eyes alert, and his body tense. The Mustang, once so fearful of the world around him, now stood strong and resilient. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different tonight. Lena stopped for a moment, glancing up at the sky. Dark clouds were gathering quickly, moving in from the horizon. A storm was coming, and it was going to be a bad one. She knew they had to find shelter fast. But it was too late. The first raindrops hit the ground, fast and heavy, followed by a sharp crack of thunder. The wind picked up, howling through the trees as the storm unleashed its fury. Lena felt a surge of panic rise in her chest. She had been in storms before, but this felt different, more violent, more unpredictable. And in this wild, untamed place, there was no shelter to be found. Blaze's coat was already soaked, and his muscles were tense as he danced nervously on the spot. The storm raged around them, trees bending in the wind, the air crackling with electricity. Lena knew that they couldn't stay exposed like this. They needed to find cover, and fast. With a burst of determination, she grabbed the reins and urged Blaze forward. The Mustang, wary, trusted her now. He moved with speed, his hooves splashing through the mud as they raced toward a small hill in the distance. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as they fought against the storm, the wind screaming in their ears, the rain coming down harder, soaking them both to the bone. The ground beneath them turned to muck, but Blaze pushed forward with all his strength, his hooves slipping, but finding purchase again and again. Lena's face was drenched, but she didn't care. She was focused on one thing, getting them both to safety. Finally, they reached the hill, and at the top, they found a small rock outcrop that offered just enough cover to shield them from the worst of the storm. Lena breathed a sigh of relief as she slid off Blaze's back, her legs shaky from the adrenaline of the ride. She patted his side, her fingers brushing over his wet coat. "You did it," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. Blaze nickered softly, his eyes wide and alert, but his body relaxed slightly now that they were safe. The storm howled around them, but in that small shelter, they found a moment of peace. Lena stood with her back to the rock, leaning against it for support. Blaze stood beside her, his head down, his body still trembling, but now from the cold rather than fear. They were both exhausted, but there was something else, something deeper, that connected them now. It wasn't just the physical journey they had been on or the wild forces they had faced together. It was the emotional journey, the healing they had both undergone. Blaze had learned to trust again, and Lena had learned that she wasn't alone and that she could be strong and vulnerable at the same time. The storm raged on through the night, but in that small shelter, the two of them were safe together. They had weathered another storm, literally and figuratively, and as the night deepened, Lena's mind wandered to the journey that still lay ahead. The storm would pass, just as all things did, and when it did, they would continue forward, stronger, more connected than ever. Blaze snorted softly, his body shifting closer to Lena. She smiled, wrapping her arm around his neck, finding warmth in his presence despite the cold. "We're going to make it through this, Blaze," she whispered, almost to herself. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the forest soaked and shimmering in the aftermath. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden beams of light across the landscape. The world had been cleansed by the tempest, and in its wake, a sense of calm had settled over the land. Lena awoke to the sound of birds chirping, the air fresh and crisp. The rock outcrop where they had sheltered the night before had protected them. And now Blaze stood a few feet away, his coat glistening with dew, his muscles still rippling from the previous night's exertion. For a moment, Lena simply watched him. It wasn't just the way he had carried her through the storm, his strength, his determination. It was the way he had been there for her, how they had both helped each other heal. The bond between them was something deeper than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just a story of rescue. It was a story of mutual salvation. The morning light illuminated Blaze's face, and for the first time, Lena truly understood what it meant to have come this far. They weren't just survivors of a forest. They were survivors of a life that had tried to break them, of a world that had been unkind to them both. But here they were, standing strong, ready for whatever came next. Lena moved closer, reaching out to gently brush her fingers through Blaze's mane. His dark eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was silence, a moment of pure understanding. They didn't need words. Everything they had been through together had forged a connection that needed no explanation. "Are you ready?" she whispered, more to herself than to him. Blaze nickered softly, his tail swishing with a quiet energy that made her smile. He was ready, just as she was. The two of them started walking again, the ground still damp beneath their feet, but no longer treacherous. The trees parted as they made their way toward the open field, and Lena felt the familiar weight of the reins in her hands. She had once feared this journey, unsure of where it would lead. But now, with Blaze at her side, she felt more certain than ever. The path ahead was still uncertain. There would be more obstacles and more challenges, but they had faced the worst of it. They had survived, and they would keep moving forward. As they reached the edge of the forest, The vast open plain stretched before them. The world seemed endless, full of possibilities. Lena felt the breath catch in her chest as the wind picked up. Once more, carrying with it the promise of something new, Blaze lifted his head. His ears pricked, his eyes scanning the horizon. Lena felt it too, the excitement of the unknown, the pull of something greater than they had ever known before. She swung her leg over Blaze's back, settling into the saddle with a sense of ease from the bond they had built. For the first time, she didn't feel like a stranger to this life. She didn't feel alone. With Blaze, she felt like she had found her place in the world. "Let's go," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet determination. Blaze responded with a soft snort and a gentle nudge, and together they began to move forward. The wind caught in Blaze's mane as they galloped across the plains, the open space before them feeling like freedom in its purest form. The sun was rising higher in the sky, its golden light reflecting off the landscape, and for the first time in a long while, Lena felt truly alive. She didn't know what the future held, but with Blaze by her side, she was ready for whatever came. Next, they had fought for this moment, and together they would continue to fight for each other. For the journey ahead, they were no longer broken, they were whole, and together, stronger than ever before. Lena and Blaze's journey was more than just survival. It was a testament to resilience, courage, and the transformative power of an unbreakable bond. They both faced their fears, overcame unimaginable odds, and emerged stronger, not just as riders and horses but as partners who had found their place in a vast, uncertain world. Their story is a reminder that no matter how dark the path may seem, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and with loyalty, strength, and trust, anything is possible. Do you believe in the power of second chances? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of resilience and survival.